how much you know the history of the post-Soviet territories. I don't know how many information do you have about our war. I will start with the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a sign that communism went wrong. Its failure was predicted by many 100 years before its failure, but the communists didn't fail alone. The Soviet Union, which was a former Russian empire, which was ideologically built over the communist ideas, failed too. Well, both communist ideology and Russian empire, which had at that time two different names. First was the core of this empire, Soviet Union, and second, it was a pact, Warsaw Pact, which united Eastern European countries around the Soviet Union. And at the beginning of 80s of the last century, the economy of Soviet Union became very unstable and very problematic, and many people predicted that it will fail. It failed in 1991, but already in 1989, it was visible that the Cold War was lost by the Soviet Union. Next step, in 2 years, the Soviet Union collapsed. And what happened? All countries that made Soviet Union started their own way of development. Ukraine opted for democracy, for free market economy. Other countries have chosen some other ways. For example, countries in the Middle Asia, such countries as Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and other opted for their more traditional way of autocratic regimes. Russia elaborated a kind of democracy, autocracy, and now turned into the quasi-totalitarian state. And Ukraine always wanted to be integrated in European alliances. At that time, you know, Ukraine told that probably we will do much steps to join European Union, and probably we will do much steps to join NATO as a European Atlantic Alliance, military alliance. Well, that was our project, how to develop. And Ukraine also opted for freedom of religion. In the Soviet Union, religion was oppressed. There were some possibilities to have restricted religious, I wouldn't even say freedom, because most Russian Orthodox Church, on the one hand, was forbidden. On the other hand, it was under close control of the KGB, and some parishes could function. Some official structures of Russian Orthodox Church could even have international relations, which were rather international relations controlled by the Communist Party and the KGB. All the other religions and Christian denominations were forbidden. Few Roman Catholic parishes allowed to function, even one small seminary in Latvia, and nothing more. For example, Ukrainian Orthodox Church was forbidden at the beginning of the Soviet Union. Greek Catholic Church was forbidden in 1946 after the Second World War. Therefore, religious life in Ukraine was revived with the fall of the Berlin Wall, and with the fall of the Soviet Union, we got a freedom. But still, at the inertial way, the government wanted to take control over religious processes and tried to impose a kind of state religious institution which would regulate relations between religions, between Christian denominations and the state. Thanks God, the government didn't succeed, but this institution transformed into the informal platform of communication between religions and Christian denominations. Christians, Muslims, Jews, different Christian denominations belong to this institution, which has the name All Ukrainian Council of Religions and of Churches and Religious Communities. Well, Ukraine had several free elections to the parliament and presidential elections. We have already the 6th president. We have already the 9th parliament. And if you compare what is going on in Russia, you have only a 2nd president, well, formally 3rd president, but Putin, when he became president after first Russian president Yeltsin, he just made a trick. He put his prime minister as a president, and he became prime minister, and in 4 years they changed. Therefore, you have, well, not a democratic country, Russia, and Ukraine, which has its problem, especially problems with corruption, but nonetheless, it is a democratic country with free market economy. That is the situation with, for example, Ukraine and Russia after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But Russia never agreed with the defeat in the Cold War, and Russia never accepted the failure of the Soviet Union. Russia always wanted to do a revenge, to become again a huge empire and huge superpower, geopolitical superpower on the global scale. Well, and Russia told this openly on several occasions, that Russia wants to restore Russian empire, either in the form of the Soviet Union or in the form of or in different form, for example, the former Tsarist Russian Empire. It doesn't matter. Russia wants to restore the empire. And in 1992, Russia undertook first military invasion. Russia helped separatists in Moldova and created a kind of territory which has the name of Transnistrial Popular Republic, which is not recognized internationally. Then Russia tried to occupy and succeeded to occupy a part of Georgian territory, Abkhazia. Also, no one recognized this. And then in 2003, Russia tried to annexate a small island in the Kerch Strait. If you see this small maritime passage between Azov Sea and Black Sea, there is a small island, Tuzla. Russia wanted to annex this island in 2003, but thanks God, the war didn't start. Taking into consideration Russian revanchist movements, Ukraine and Georgia decided to join NATO as a security umbrella for Ukraine. And in 2008, during the summit in Bucharest, in Romania, Ukraine gets the answer from NATO that the doors are open, and one day Ukraine will become a NATO member. But no dates, no concrete promises, only statements that the doors are open. And that was not accepted by Russia. And Russia started a new war against Georgia. And another part of Georgian territory was occupied. Ukraine understood that we will be the next country which Russia will attack. And indeed, it happened in 2014. But before we go further, I'd like to tell you that officially Russia announced their revanchist imperialistic aspirations during the Munich Security Conference in 2007. In 2007, President of Russia, Putin, told that the result of the Cold War is not accepted by Russia. Russia do not recognize the one polar world. Russia wants to become again a second pole in the global politics. But you must understand that at that time, China was already a huge country with a huge economy, which pretend to take Russian place in the geopolitical relationships. We have on the one hand, United States of America, which is a superpower #1 in the world. And China is rising as a second superpower. And there is no place for Russia. Therefore, Russia decided to escalate the situation. Well, the idea of the United States is to promote American way of life, liberal values, liberal economy around the world. China promotes its Silk Way and the Chinese way of life around the world, proposing trade with different countries. They have a lot of success in Pacific region and in Africa, in some countries. But what Russia can promote? And they decided to trade peace. They provoke war. They escalate the situation in order to trade peace agreements. Why Russia started its war against Ukraine in 2014? There are several reasons. The first reason is that it was already one generation which was born and raised during the Ukrainian independence, and more people didn't want to look toward East, toward Russia, but wanted to look toward West, towards Western values, toward Western Europe. And Ukraine became more and more independent from Russian heritage, which we inherited after the Soviet Union. The mentality of Ukrainians changed dramatically during the independence time. And Putin understood that he will lose its influence on Ukraine. And this influence was related to the economic relationship. For example, Putin was corrupting Ukrainian elites by allowing them the access over the gas and petrol pipelines. The gas trade, the petrol trade was an instrument in Putin's hand just to corrupt not only Ukrainian elites, but as you can see, European elites too. Look, Gerhard Schröder, former chancellor of Germany, now works for the Russian gas industries. Not only Gerhard Schröder, but other top officials of the European countries too. Well, and in order to take revanchist steps, Putin had to justify his policies. And for this reason, the restoration of empire was in need to create ideological justification. And the ideological justification was found. They created the so-called Russian world ideology, Ruski Mir. And Russian world ideology started just after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Many Russians immigrated to other countries around the world, and Russian government wanted to keep contacts with Russian immigration around the globe and to promote a kind of unity between Russians in Russia and Russians abroad. But very soon, this idea transformed into imperialistic ideology that everywhere where you can hear Russian language and everywhere where you can see Russian Orthodox Church, it's a territory of Russian influence. It's a territory of Russian domination. And then they tried to add to this ideology of the unity of Russians some religious and metaphysical aspects. They added this view that the old European continent doesn't exist anymore as the center of European civilization. That in the European Union, there is no more European values. There are no more family values. Everything is in decline. They even coined a term, not Europe, but they tried to call it Gay-Europe, claiming that there is no family, only homosexual relations, which are values for European Union. Well, that was the kind of pretension that now only Russia is the country which defend European values and defend family values, and that Russia has mission to promote this Russian ideology in order to save the whole world from decline. Therefore, Russia just proclaimed itself as a kind of messiah just to save the European civilization as such. And with these ideas, Russians came again with the war on the 24th of February 2022, just claiming that they came to liberate Russian-speaking people and Russian Orthodox people from the Nazi government in Ukraine. That was the official statement of Russian president. Why Russia needed to occupy Ukraine? There are several reasons. One of them I mentioned, that the change of mentality and Russia was losing control over Ukraine, over Ukrainian population. but more. Russia depends on Ukraine because the very name Russia came into history in the 1721, when Russian Tsar Peter changed the name of his country. The country has the name Kingdom of Moscovia, and in 1721, Tsar Peter gave a new name to his country, Russia. Where this name come from? From the old name of Ukraine, Kievan Rus. Kievan Rus was the old name of Ukraine, or I would even say more. Ukraine used to have two parallel names, Kievan Rus and Ukraine. And we find this parallel naming of Ukraine since 12th century. Russia claims that the history of Russia starts with Kievan Rus. Partly it is true that some nobilities in 13th century went on the northeast, seized some tribes in that territories and created new principalities, which they organized under the Moscow dominations and called this Kingdom of Moscow. They brought there their language, their religion. For this reason, Ukrainian and Russian languages are of one and the same root, the Slavic languages. But also, Russia needs Ukraine and needs our capital, Kiev, as a source of their justification of a kind of religious wars. Because Russia claims that Christianity in Russia comes from the Kiev, when Ukrainian king Volodymyr baptized Ukraine in 988 at the end of 10th century. Well, without Ukraine, the history of Russia, the religious life of Russia, it has much problems. It is impossible to justify many things, and especially their imperialistic aspirations. Well, this ideology of Russian world now has philosophical, metaphysical, religious, military, cultural aspects. And this ideology just is destined to justify restoration of Russian Empire. For this reason, to attack Ukraine was the aim number one, the goal number one. After Putin, after the occupation of Ukraine, the next target will be Baltic states, Poland, Moldova, Romania, and other countries which belonged to countries of the Warsaw Pact. So, shortly, this is my introductory remarks. Now, I would be very glad if you ask questions and we can discuss the situation in Ukraine and the situation with Ukraine-Russian war and the general